Hi everyone, welcome back to another session. So here we'll be talking about CSS. I believe you guys, went through HTML thing, and so far I didn't get any questions from anybody about any confusions. And from what I learned, you guys did quite a couple of things, and I'm quite impressed with what you guys did, the HTML class. So now we'll be diving straight into CSS. If you followed us from the very start of the whole tutorial, we talked about the HTML tutorial. In the introduction, we talked about CSS as being the beauty of what adds beauty to the website. So once again we said HTML is just like the skeleton. The CSS is now like the beauty on the skeleton. So the skeleton definitely won't make sense if it doesn't have the head, the nose, the eye, clothes, and maybe black hair color, brown hair color, stuff like that. So all this beauty you get to see on the human being is equivalent to the CSS. You understand? So that's why it's called cascading style sheets as the name of CSS. So you just add it to your HTML to beautify your, your HTML code, your HTML skeleton. So let's go straight in. So as you can see, if you look at my mouse, you can see from garden to plate. So this is something that CSS can do for you, like make you can add colors to, because normally you can add colors in HTML, but with CSS you can add colors to maybe a paragraph heading, maybe a whole text, or the whole background. If you don't want it to be white, you want it to be black, and maybe the color of the text, you want it to be white. So this is just where CSS comes in handy. Okay. So maybe you guys can always go through this material. You're free to go through it. Free to play with the codes in it. The more you play with the codes, the easier it gets for you, to understand the concept of things. And I believe all of you now have a new text editor, which is Visual Studio Code. That's our text editor right there. That's it, Visual Studio Code. So if you don't have it for now, just make sure you download Visual Studio Code. And then something that could be of help to you is this. When you download this, you can always come to the extensions, but then you make sure you're connected to the internet for you to do this part. Search for, I think, prettier, yeah, code formatter, prettier. That's it, prettier. So mine is installed already. That's why you can't see the install button. But for the first time, if you search for prettier code formatter, you should see an install button on top. Just hit the install button, and then the prettier extension gets installed on your VS Code. The essence of prettier extension is just to make sure that your codes are well formatted. So after doing that, I think you might need to come to File, Preference Settings. So you could search for editor. Okay, sorry, search for Format and Save. Format and Save, and make sure the stuff is checked. So make sure this stuff is checked, so that once you hit the save, the prettier extension will format your code well. So let's get back to our material. That's it. So this is our material, and So you can just go ahead and read up the stuff. Might not get into the nitty-gritty of everything, but it's still explaining how CSS works. So you may just read it up. Then this is what the syntax of a CSS element looks like. Sorry, CSS code looks like. This is what the syntax looks like. You have your selector. Selector could be paragraph. Selector is just it could be paragraph. It could be heading. It could be a div. It could be whatever. You know, it could be a class. It could be an ID. Like in the last class we did in HTML, I think the last HTML class I played around with this a little to show you guys what it looks like while using your CSS. So this part is your selector. This part of the code is your selector. That's the part before the curly brace, the opening curly brace is the selector. And then this is the attributes. You understand? This is like the property, but in general it's called declaration. But this is like the attribute, and then this is the value. You can also call this a property, and this is the value assigned to it. So you can say, okay, I want the font family of this paragraph to be Arial. It could be Arial, it could be anything you want it to be. You can say font size, okay, font dash size. I want it to be 30px or 50px or 100px. So that's just it. We are now styling this paragraph. So that's the essence of what we are doing. Let's get straight into it. So, okay, we've talked about property and value. Yes, so this is a property. This whole thing is called a declaration, but this is a property. This part is called property, and this part is called a value. But you can see how it's being used. So just make sure you are using it properly. And also, you can always have multiple. Selectors. So what this means is I want all H1s, all H2s, all H3s to have a font family of Arial and then a color yellow. You understand? So this is how it works. So that means once you do this, that means anywhere in your HTML code that the H1 is, that there is a H1, there's a H2, there's a H3, automatically it comes with the font family of these and then the color yellow. So I talked about that in the last class. So I might just do one or two examples and then get to understand the whole thing better. Okay, so let's do quick example. Yes, okay, so a quick example. Come back here, close this guy. So we can create a new file. So this is how to use your Visual Studio Code. So let's create a head. So now you can use tab, the tab key on your keyboard. See, just one tab and then it goes that way. That's the beauty of this. So you see title. Title intro to CSS. So you know what? I'm going to try to save this file first. Control S. All right. Control. Let me use so you guys see what I'm doing. Let me save this file first so it makes sense to you guys. Don't do this like me. It's not good. But it's just because we've been using this, I've been using this folder for this class. So but it's not the ideal way. So don't save your website in a music folder or something. I'll show you guys the ideal way, but for now, let's focus on trying to make our codes work. So let's call this my dash CSS dash class tutorial. Let me just call it my first CSS. My first CSS class. It's a very long name. And then .html. Save it as .html inside my example.com folder, which is the website folder. So save it there. You can see the color changes and everything. So now let's go back. You can see the essence of, because I've saved my file, that's why this stuff is auto suggesting things for me now. I don't know if you understand. So once you save your file and do slash, you see that automatically helps you. That's the essence of this editor. So now, if I want to open a body, I'll see body, just, so it suggests, you can see what's happening. So it makes coding faster for you. So let's say I have a H1, you can see automatically it closes it for you. So I can call this my first heading, comes here. So let me do, for instance, a paragraph. Call this hello, the this. So for instance, this is a paragraph. Let's say this is another H2, for instance. Let's say H2, and once I close it, automatically close for me. I'll say this is my second heading, for instance. And then now we can close, sorry, now we can close HTML. So your, before we go ahead to say things, I installed a theme. That's why the color of my editor looks kind of somehow. So yours will definitely look different from mine, but the color of my editor looks somehow because I installed a theme. What's the name of my theme? But don't worry about installing themes now. Just go with the default theme that comes with your code editor. So just go with that for now. Don't bother installing themes. So once I save, you see the essence of the prettier extension I installed. It formats this stuff for me. So it makes it look nice. And then what else do I need to do? Okay, so let's add, this is a basic HTML code, no CSS. So let me add a styling. First of all, this type of styling is called, this type of styling is called an internal styling, right? It's called an internal styling. So there are three types of styling. You have the external style, you have, that's the external CSS styling, you have the internal CSS styling, and then you have the inline styling. So what I'm doing now is internal styling, because I'm just putting this in my head, putting it in within my head, just like this. So this, once you see something like this, or even if you see it this way, some people take out this stuff and make it look this way. It will still work, right? But I'm just using the very ideal way of doing it, which is doing it this way. So let's say I want to style all the paragraph. Okay, let me see. Let me add one more paragraph, for instance. Let's see. Hello. This is just a second paragraph. So, and go to add, and what do I add now? Style, let me add P. So I want to style the paragraphs. You can see how I'm doing it. Once you just open the quotes, it automatically, open the braces, it automatically arranges it for you this way. So let's say I want all paragraphs to have a color. Sorry, let me do background color first, for instance. So it doesn't really matter anyway. Color can come from background color, but let's say I want it to have a background color of black. And then let's say a color of maybe let's do green. So what this means is I want all paragraphs to have a background color of black and the color green. It doesn't matter how you arrange it. Color can come first before background color. Anyhow you arrange it, no matters. It's you're following the syntax properly. So let's save. So if I go to okay. It's ready. Okay, let's open my file again. I think I deleted this stuff. I think I deleted the file. I'm not so sure now, but let's go to music. Example. Okay, that's it. You can see what just happened now, right? So let me go back to, okay. Let me go back to opening my file, open file, sorry. I was in the wrong thing actually. So you can see what I just did. I styled all paragraphs, making it to have a background of black and then a color of green. So the color is the text color itself, while the background dash color is background color of anything, whether it's a div or, so let's just put, so let me add a div now. So let's say this is a div, right? This is a div. Hey, it's just nothing. This is a div I added now. So let me style the div to have same background color black and then a color green. So instead of coming here to say, okay, div, sorry, should be after this, still within here. I can do this in two ways. I can come here and do div, background color, black, color, green. So this is more or less like a repetition. So let me refresh my page. You can see this is a div. Hey, this is a div, nothing serious. So instead of doing this repetition, there's a cleaner way of doing this. So I'm going to, I don't want to delete this, I'll comment it. So to comment, the shortcut to comment is Control/. So once you Control/, make sure you select it first. So Control-Z to undo, select what you want to comment. I can delete it actually if I want, but I'm just trying to show you guys how to comment. I'll say Control/, and that's it. Now is this code won't show anymore. So I can just come here and say P. I've started P. So I want to add div. I can just say comma div. So I want this same styling to be applied on paragraph and also on div. So once I Control S to save, come back and refresh, you see code remains the same. So that's just a little intro of how to use CSS. So let's go back to, so you can see this is a CSS code where the body was styled, you know, the H1, H2 has a color of this, the paragraph, so these are styles, and it has to be in the style tag. Alternatively, but there was no style tag here, so we'll get to this part now. You can see within the head, there was no style tag, like I did in my own example. So this is an example of an external styling. So let's go to the next page using external CSS. So now if you want to do external CSS, it just kind of makes your code look neat, right? So instead of just opening up this place and then putting all your styles within the head like I did in my code. So one thing I can do is to come to my folder, my website folder. So this is what I like doing to make sure that my code, my folder, my website folder stays neat. This is my folder, for instance, example.com or example. You can just call it just example to see what or anything I want. So to make my code look neat, I like putting my CSS file in a folder, right? Just say CSS folder. I create a folder for just CSS to make it look neat, right? And then this is what I'm going to do now. I'll go to file. So I need to create a new file. You see that? So now I'm going back to this page. So I don't want this stuff here anymore. So I can just copy just this. So you know what? I'm going to delete this now for now. So let me just delete it. Delete, save. So now that stuff I copied, I'm going to paste it in this new sheet I created here, right? And then because still untitled, I need to save it as .css. So I'll go here and do, sorry. I'll go here and do save. Save. So when you do a save, you can now go to the CSS folder where you want it to be saved inside and call it, let's call this, let me call, you can call it anything. Let's say, and I call it my style. .css, or you call it styles.css, whatever you feel like, but make sure you put .css so it gets saved as a CSS file. So you don't save it as a HTML file, you make sure you're saving it as a .css file. So, and then you hit save. You can see automatically once you save, see the difference. This .html, this .css. So these are the extensions, .html and .css. So now, I'm going to save this guy. So let's go back to my page so you see. So this is my page. When I refresh my page, you see all the styles are gone. So the question is, how do I link that style that I just created in this .css file? How do I link it into this .html file right here? So that's where the external CSS styling comes in. So we still need to put it in the head, but what we now need to do is to use the link tag. So this is the essence of this link tag. Here we have, you can see in our book, this is material, this is what it looks like. Link, then the href attribute or the property states where the source of the file, right? And then this is the type of the file that you're trying to link. You get it? And then the rel specifies the relationship between the HTML page and the file it is linked to. You understand? So you're just trying to say, okay, the file I'm trying to link to is a style sheet. So that's just the essence of the file. So it's a style sheet inside maybe a CSS folder, and this is style sheet, right? So this is just the syntax. Just take note of this syntax. That's what it looks like. So if you go back to your code, let's finish up my code. Let's link this file right here, right? So let's do href equal to, so what did I call my folder where I have the CSS? I call the CSS, right? And I call the file my-style.css. That's this file here, my-style. So I'll open the folder CSS. Inside the CSS folder, I'm trying to link my-style.css. And then next thing you try to do is to state the type. The type is text/CSS. Relationship is the style sheet. So that's it. So once you're done, it doesn't have, you don't close it this way, right? You don't close it like this. So this is one of those tags that you don't close this way. So this is the ideal way to close it. So you just put this, just the same way you close your image. Simple. So and then Control S to save, or you just come in and hit save. So now, once I refresh my page, it should pick up all the styles inside my dash style.css. So let me go to my page. So you can see what it looks like by default. So when I refresh, it picks up those styles. There. So that's how to do your external CSS. And then what else do we have left? So let's go back to internal CSS was the one we just did. That's something like this. That was the first example we did, something like this. This is what we call internal CSS. Just put it within this. So you could read up all this stuff for maybe some extra info, but I'm just trying to show you guys around. And then the last one, but not the least, is the, I don't know if it was mentioned here. Oh, no. Let me see. Okay, it wasn't mentioned there. I don't know why. I don't know why. Maybe it could be somewhere. Okay, it's actually here. Inline style. Inline styling. That's what I was trying to look for. So use the internal styling, and then you now have to do the inline style. This is what the inline style looks like. It's not difficult. It's just pretty straightforward. Okay. So now let's say, let's say I want to make, I don't know if I styled H2. Okay, let me use the H2 as an instance. This is what the inline style looks like. Sorry, H1, let me use H1. This one is inline, just, that's why it's called inline. Inside the opening tag of the element you want to style, just say style equal to, then you now start putting the style. Let's say color brown. Then you put, if you want to add more things, you put the semicolon. Then you could say, let's say font size. Sorry, font dash size. Maybe I want it to be let's say 300 px. You see that? So I could keep adding more things inside it. And then once I'm done, I just say Control S, or I just say save. So this is an example of an inline style. This is what it looks like. It starts from here and ends here. So if you want to add more things, you can just keep adding. I could say, okay, I want font style to be Italy. So I want it to be Italy, for instance. You can see this stuff is auto-suggesting stuff for me. So that's the beauty of this. So this is an example of an inline style. So just call the style as a property or an attribute, and then you pass the values, each one. After each one, you can see color, colon, brown, which is the color I want to use, semicolon, you closes this one, as in int this one. Then you add another style for it, font, uses this another attribute, sorry, including the semicolon, this colon, just almost the same way it looks here. You understand? So once I'm done, I've styled H1 inline so I can save. So let's go back to my browser so you see what I've done. You can see what my H1 looks like. Remember, I gave you the font size of 300 px. That's why it looks horrible. You can see that. So if I reduce the font size to maybe, let's say 100 px, 300 or so much. So let's say 100 px and I refresh. You can see what it looks like now, and it's in Italy. So there you go. So this is an example of an inline style. And then one more thing I need to specify too is this. So remember we styled paragraph, right? We call the background color black. Now see. So let's go to this paragraph. Maybe this, okay, let me do it for the second paragraph. Let me do an inline style. So you see. So let me call, instead of back, let me call the background color for this particular paragraph. background color, let me call it yellow. So watch. You see that? So now what this thing now tells us is that an inline style overrides an internal or external styling. I don't know if you understand, because you remember, I styled all paragraphs. Anywhere there's a P, I just said the background should be black and the color should be green. But now, remember this is a P, but I now did an inline style. I now did an inline style for this particular paragraph, just this paragraph. So that's why when I viewed the website, it affected just this paragraph, but this other paragraph remained the same. So an inline style, if you do an inline style, it overrides any other style that's in the sheet. Like whether it's an external or an internal style, the inline style overrides it. So, but when I take this thing off right now, and take off this inline style I did, give it back as a P, save it back, P, and automatically the style in the style sheet, the external style sheet comes back on it. So that's one thing I wanted to point out to you guys. And one last thing we'll talk about is the, let me call it now. One last thing I want to talk about, okay, the CSS selectors. So you guys could read up the CSS selectors, read up all this content. But what I'm trying to show you guys now is some of these, which I've mentioned in my previous classes. This is a universal selector. So if you want to apply something to all elements on a page, you use this, right? So this is what I mean. Let's say I want all items, everything. Let's say I want all to universal selector. So I want everything to have a background color of black and a color of green. So let me do color yellow. So watch what's going to happen now. So watch everything, including the body, including the paragraph, the heading, everything now has a black background and a yellow color, except for this one. Why this one didn't take place is because there's an inline styling on it. So that's why it's still overrided that rule I said. You can see that, or for everything, body and everything, they had that. They now have a black background and a yellow color. So that's the essence of the universal selector. So type selector, we've talked about it, where you can style the H1, H2, H3, paragraph, div, EM, whatever, any element at all. That's what it matches element names. That's what it means. And then the class selector, like we said in our previous class, we talked about the class, sorry, the class selectors and then the ID selectors, where we said for IDs, you can use the hash. And then for classes, you use the dots. So for instance, let me take you back to that class again. Let me just do it too. So, okay, let's say I want this. Well, I want to remove. I want to do Control Z to undo what I just did now. And then I'll save Control S. So let's say I want this paragraph, just this particular paragraph, right, to have maybe a font size of 50px, and then maybe, let's say, font color of yellow, or let's say font color blue. Remember, there are two paragraphs here. This is one paragraph. On line 10, there's one paragraph. Then on line 12, there's the second paragraph. But I want to focus on this paragraph on line 10. Oh, sorry, on line 12. So I want it to have, a black sorry, maybe let's say green background and a blue color, for instance. Okay, so let's do that. So I don't want to do an inline styling. I want to still continue using my external style sheet. So what I can do is this. I can give this paragraph an ID so that I use this ID to identify it inside the CSS file. So let me give it an ID and call it para2. So this is an ID I've given it. So if I want to style this particular paragraph in this my external style sheet, I already know what I've called it. I've given it a name, so I'll call it by the name in this stuff. So because it's an ID, I give it an ID. Remember, give it an ID. So I will now have to use a hashtag first before calling the para2. Para2. Okay. Sorry about the H. Sorry about the H. So let's see, go back. So let's say I want to do the paragraph right now. So I want to style the para2. I was saying I'm giving it an ID of para2. So if I want to reference that ID para2, I have to put a hash before it, right? You can see the suggestion, this stuff is saying, yes, there's an element of the ID para2, and that's what I'm trying to style here. So I can now call it, give it a background color of, let's say blue, background color of blue, for instance. Nice and simple, and then maybe a color of yellow. With this, and maybe let's maybe give it a font size of give it font size 40px. Maybe what else do I give it? Okay. Let's save it. So you can see the only thing I called in this file is just I named this paragraph, and then this is where I styled it. Because I've given it an ID, I used a hash. So when I refresh this page, okay, so when I refresh this page, you can see this is what happens. My style comes to only the named paragraph. You understand? So it comes to only the named paragraph. So what did I call this paragraph? So let me just introduce a little tool that you guys might need for now. So if I right click and inspect on this paragraph, you can see that's it. You can see it's PID paragraph, this. So that's it. And you can even see the style I gave it here. So this one, nice to you guys might like. For now, I think it's not bad. So that's about it. And then if it was a class that I was going to style, then I'll have to use the dots. So let's say I have, let me take this stuff out again. Let's say I have 4 paragraphs. Paragraph 1, 2, paste this here. Okay, let me paste it after this div. Paragraph 2. Let me paste another one after this div. See, so I now have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. Now I just want the first paragraph and maybe this last paragraph to have the same style. So this is what I'm going to do. Because it's now more than one, I don't get to use ID, I'll have to use a class because I want to style more than one. I want to give a style to more than one element. So I'll give this one, I'll call it, let me call it new para. So because I want to style this last one as well, I'll have to give it with the same class. I want it to have the same background, the same color, the same everything. So I have to still call this a class and still give it the same name I give this. So new para. So any style I give to new para, these two paragraphs will pick up that style. So let's go and style new para. I might take this one off now. Remember, since it's a class, I use not an ID, I use dot new para, which is the name of that class. Then I start styling it. So I could just give it, for now, let me give it a background color. The background color of brown now, and then the color of yellow. Let's see, color white. So let's see. So let's go back to this. So if I refresh, you can see just the first and the last have this style of brown and then a white right up. Why? Because I used a class. So I named the two classes, I give them the same name, and then I just type new para. So it's like a collective name that anything that has the, sorry about the break. So anything that has new para class automatically picks up that styling. So let's go back to our book and then finish up for today. So same thing. So if you want to style, target only paragraph elements whose class attribute has a value of notes, you can do something like this. Paragraph element first, then dot. Remember dot, this means it's a class called note. So I've talked about ID selector. You can try out child selector. You can do another list. Maybe this could be something you could try out on your own. Matches an element that is a direct child of another. Let's say you have an A tag. Don't worry, with time you will get to understand these things better. So let's say you have an A tag inside this li. That's when you do something like this, li greater than A tag. So it means that any anchor element that is inside this li will pick up whatever style you put inside it, maybe a black background, a color, or whatever you put inside. Same thing with descendants, matches an element that, so let's say, let me just give you a little instance. Let's say I want maybe inside is div. Okay, let's say inside is div. Sorry, go back. So let's say inside this div, right here, I have a span. So let's go. Oh, sorry. Hey, just a span here, for instance. So you guys can just try this out. So okay, let me remove this for now. No, it doesn't matter, but let me just remove it for now. Let me put a paragraph here. So this is the paragraph. And there is a span inside a div. So if I want to style the span, I can try out the descendants. So I can say div span, and then I'll say color. Let me just put on the color for here, blue. So I'm trying to say that wherever there's a span inside a div, you should have a blue color. So if you go check this, you can see that. So there's a div, but the span itself only has the blue color. Meanwhile, the div itself has a black background, and then the paragraph inside has this, the green box. Because I said the span inside the div should have a blue, that's why it takes that. So that's the essence of the descendant selector. You could try out the child selector. You try out some of these things on your own, and then see what it looks like. So these are some CSS rules. We should be wrapping up this class now. So these are some CSS rules you could read up. If two selectors are identical, the latter of the two will take precedence. You understand? Because it's cascading from top to bottom, right? So let's say two paragraphs have the same, there are two paragraphs, for instance, there's a paragraph here that has maybe color. You can see this guy there's a B tag inside the paragraph, right? So it says the B tag inside the paragraph should have color blue. And then there's another B tag here inside another paragraph, inside the paragraph too, that says it should have color violet. So what the CSS does is the way to cascade is what will appear will be this one, right? This will appear instead of this. Why? Because it's coming from the computer is reading, the browser rather is reading, okay, from the top to bottom. So it will do this first. And then, but what we show on the screen will be the second one because this is the last thing it sees, not this. All right. So that's how CSS cascades. So you guys could just read up some of these extra info, just read up some of the extra info, read up some of this extra info as well. And then if you have any questions, you just feel free to reach out to me. Just feel free to reach out to me. So let me just say something about the inheritance. If you have a paragraph, for instance, here, okay, I think I'm seeing something page. Okay, so now what this means is this. Remember, it's the body housing all this stuff. And then maybe let's say you've given the body, you've styled the body already to have a color. We'll get to this part. This is a color code, right? Let's say you should have a color of this, and then color font family of this. So anything, it means that anything inside the body, we have this color. So remember, this div is always inside the body, right? A div is always inside the body by default. So this thing, even if you've styled this, it just means that this page automatically, that's this div called page, we automatically have a color of this. You understand? Font family of this. And then if you don't want it to have a separate padding, let's say you don't want to put a separate padding, you can put inherit. What this means is that this page class, now we inherit the padding the padding of the element that's containing it. So remember, the page is inside the body, right? So once you say inherit, it automatically picks this padding. I don't know if it makes sense. So you can just try this out and see what it looks like. So once you use this keyword inherit, it automatically goes to check the parent, what's containing it, and then inherit whatever is there. So if the padding that is housing this page has 20px, and you just come to the page, style and say inherit, automatically you're saying it should go inherit this padding. So that's how inherit works, or inheritance works. We've talked about, you could just read up this. You could just read up this and then just pick up the extra info that is needed. So I think that should be all for now. You can read up this info as well. So sometimes there's some CSS styles that might work on a particular browser, but might look differently on another browser. So sometimes some of these styles, some of these attributes are browser dependent. So what worked in, let's say Internet Explorer 11 might not still work now, might look somehow weird now. So that's the essence of all these extra information you have here. So sometimes some people write like a fallback code so that if it doesn't match this, it will look this way on a browser. It doesn't, if there's a Safari browser, it should appear this way on a browser. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of all those things later, but right now you can just read up this and pick up the extra information that you need to have, right? Okay, that should be all for now. Please make sure you check these sites out. Make sure you read these and check these sites out. That should be all for now for the introduction. Bye. See you on the next one.